So this is a short video adding on to the pets video that I made before. Uh, Another thing I forgot for the first video. Um, I talked about how our first cat Lulu had developed bone cancer and we had to put her to sleep. And my parents waited about 3 months before they finally gave in and got another cat. So they went over to a shelter in a nearby town and they found uh, Sailor. They were looking for the cat in the photo in the article, talking about the shelter and oh, please adopt little Tinkerbell, whatever the cat's name was. And so they went over looking for that cat and got there, and of course that cat was taken. But they looked around, and there was one cat walking around outside the cage, and they said, "Oh, that's Sailor, 22-pound half Maine Coon cat mix, big cat, double paws, all 4 feet." And he was so well behaved that they let him out and just wander around during the day. So they grab up Sailor and bring him home. Um, when we put Lulu to sleep, we buried her in the backyard. And turns out our backyard was like I said, we had about 4 acres of woods. We had a big garden right behind the house, and then the woods started. Well, just into the woods, apparently my grandparents had buried every pet they'd ever had. So occasionally you would see bones coming up to the surface out there, but nothing spooky, just a little bit weird. But we buried Lulu right at the top of the driveway. We had a white pine tree. At the time, it was about 12, 15 feet tall in one of the flower beds. And so walked around, and father buried her in the back of that pine tree. So it's not something you can just walk by. You have to walk in through the flower beds towards the woods, and then you find the spot where she was buried. So anyway, we bring Sailor home, and pretty quickly noticed within a couple days, I think it was, Sailor would wander the yard, loved having a big yard, followed us around out in the woods. But Sailor pretty quickly would start sitting exactly on the spot where we buried Lulu. And it wasn't an obvious thing. There were leaves covering it already. It'd been a while. But Salem would go right to that spot behind the pine tree and just sit on that spot. Probably for the first 6 to 8 months that we had Sailor, that became one of his sitting places right on top of where Lulu was buried. And I talked in previous video about how I had heard Lulu meowing from the top of the stairs while Sailor was asleep in the kitchen. And I'm starting to think that we know animals have heightened sensibility or heightened sensitivity to what's going on, even if we can't see it or feel it. So I'm thinking Sailor was in touch with Lulu, and Lulu guided him to that spot. So hopefully they're getting along well up in heaven. Sailor was not a particularly friendly cat when it came to other cats or especially dogs. He actually scared off a couple dogs from our yard because he was pretty intimidating. And every time he would walk around the yard, all the squirrels would be on the bottom branches of the trees screaming at him. So hopefully Sailor and Lulu are getting along well up in heaven. So just thought that was interesting and forgot to mention that in my first video. But if you have any pet experiences like that, please share them in the comments.